The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by any species in known space. Its walls were made of living crystal that had been grown over thousands of years, and they stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed near the ceiling. Representatives from 47 different alien civilizations sat in curved rows that rose like mountains on all sides. Some of these beings had scales that glowed with inner light. Others floated in special containers because they were made of gas instead of solid matter. A few had so many eyes that looking at them made most humans feel dizzy. In the center of this impossible room, standing on a small platform meant for the accused, was a single human woman named Catherine Holloway. She was 53 years old. Her brown hair had streaks of gray in it, and she wore a simple gray suit that looked almost boring compared to the colorful robes and ceremonial armor worn by the aliens around her. She had no claws, no telepathic abilities, no natural weapons of any kind. By galactic standards, she was as dangerous as a small house pet. The aliens in the chamber certainly thought so. Many of them were not even paying attention to her. They whispered among themselves, discussing trade deals and political games that they considered far more important than the fate of one primitive species. High Arbiter Zethquan rose from his seat at the top of the chamber. He was 12 feet tall, with pale blue skin and 4 muscular arms. His people had ruled over dozens of star systems for longer than humans had existed as a species. When he spoke, his voice boomed through the hall like thunder. "Humanity of Earth," he announced, "you have been found guilty of 17 violations of the Galactic Accord." Catherine did not react. She simply stood with her hands folded behind her back and listened. "You have expanded your colonies beyond the boundaries we assigned to you," Zethquan continued. "You have refused to allow our inspectors full access to your military technology. You have declined to join our collective defense network as required by law." Still, Catherine said nothing. Around the chamber, a few more aliens began to pay attention. There was something strange about this human. Most species trembled when the High Arbiter read charges against them. This woman looked almost bored. "Oh, seriously," Zethquan said, his voice growing harder. "You have been hiding primitive species on at least 12 different worlds. Species that should have been reported to the Council for proper management. This is a direct violation of the non-interference mandate, one of our most sacred laws." The chamber fell completely silent. Everyone knew what came next. "The Galactic Council has shown patience," the High Arbiter declared. "For 60 of your Earth years, we have tried to bring your species into compliance through diplomatic means. We have offered compromises. We have given warnings. We have been more than fair." His 4 hands gripped the podium in front of him. "No more." Catherine finally moved. She tilted her head slightly, like a bird studying something interesting. "By unanimous vote of all 47 member species," Zethquan announced, "a state of war now exists between the Galactic Collective and the species known as humanity. You have 30 standard rotations to surrender your colonies, your fleet, and your weapons. Your species will be returned to your homeworld and confined there permanently. If you refuse, we will have no choice but to reduce your civilization to pre-spacefaring status by force." The words echoed through the Crystal Hall. This was a death sentence for human expansion among the stars. Every alien in the chamber knew it. Some looked satisfied, others looked uncomfortable. A few of the younger species representatives even looked sad, remembering when similar declarations had been made against their own peoples long ago. And then Catherine Holloway did something that nobody expected. She smiled. It was not a nervous smile or a polite diplomatic smile. It was the kind of smile that a hunter makes when the prey finally walks into the trap. "It's finally time," she said quietly. Ambassador Vrienne of the Kethra leaned forward in his seat. His species looked like giant insects, with hard shells and compound eyes that could see in 12 different spectrums of light. "Does the human understand what has happened?" He clicked through his translator. "This is not a negotiation. The Council has declared war. Your species will be destroyed if you do not surrender." Catherine looked up at the High Arbiter, and something in her expression made him feel a strange sensation he had not experienced in over 300 years. It took him a moment to recognize it as doubt. "Oh, I understand perfectly," Catherine said. Her voice was calm and clear. "And I have a message from Earth." She reached into her jacket pocket. Instantly, every weapon in the chamber pointed at her. Guards who had been standing motionless suddenly became very alert. Targeting systems locked onto her small form, Catherine pulled out a data chip, no bigger than her thumbnail. She held it up for everyone to see. "This is not a weapon," she said. "This is a history lesson." She placed the chip on the platform, and a holographic display burst into life above her. It showed images, star maps, and data streams that began filling the air around her. When humanity first met Alien 62 years ago, Catherine began, we were told the rules of the galaxy very clearly. Join the Council and follow our laws, or be conquered. Share all your technology so we can inspect it or be labeled a threat. Accept our protection, which really meant accepting our control or face the consequences. The display showed Earth as it had looked back then. A single blue world, with only a few small colonies on the Moon and Mars, primitive by galactic standards. We smiled and nodded, Catherine continued. We signed your treaties, we accepted your inspectors, followed your rules about where we could expand and what technology we could develop. Her smile grew wider. And while we were doing all of that, we spent 6 decades preparing for this exact moment. Hi, Arbiter Zethquan's 4 hands tightened on his podium. What are you saying, human? I am saying, Catherine replied, that everything you think you know about humanity is wrong. The holographic display changed. The official star maps that showed humanity's 17 small colony worlds disappeared. In their place, new dots began appearing across the galaxy. Red markers that spread like a disease across regions of space that the Council had never bothered to watch. The aliens in the chamber began to murmur, then to shout, then to scream. Every time your inspectors came to count our ships, we showed them exactly what they expected to see, Catherine said over the growing chaos. A small fleet, limited technology, a primitive species that knew its place. She paused. They never thought to look in the places we did not show them. The count on the display reached 100 hidden worlds. Then 200. Then 300. The number kept climbing. You gave us 60 years, Catherine said softly. You should not have given us 60 years. Hi, Arbiter. Zethquan stared at the display with all 6 of his eyes. For the first time in his very long life, he did not know what to say. The human woman on the platform looked up at him, and her smile held no warmth at all. Now, she said, let me tell you what humanity has really been doing. The holographic display continued to grow. Red dots spread across the star map like drops of blood falling into water. Every new marker represented a world that humanity had, colonized in secret, hidden from the eyes of the Galactic Council for decades. Catherine Holloway stood calmly at the center of the chaos. All around her, alien delegates were shouting, screaming, and clicking in dozens of different languages. Their translators struggled to keep up with the flood of panicked communications. 734 worlds, Catherine announced, her voice cutting through the noise. That is the true number of human colonies. They are spread across regions of space that your inspectors never thought to check. Worlds you classified as too hot or too cold for habitation. Asteroid belts you decided were worthless. Moons around gas giants that your surveys dismissed as unimportant. Ambassador Vreen of the Kethra rose from his seat, his compound eyes clicking rapidly. This is impossible, he said. Our sensors cover every region of colonized space. We would have detected construction on this scale. We would have seen the ship movements, the resource extraction, the communications. Your sensors see what we want them to see, Catherine replied simply. Did you really think that a species, which went from living in caves to splitting atoms, in 10,000 years would simply stop inventing because you told us to? The display zoomed in on one of the hidden colonies. It showed orbital shipyards that stretched for hundreds of miles, construction platforms as big as small moons, and ships. Thousands upon thousands of ships, arranged in neat formations, waiting in the darkness between stars. While your inspectors examined our official fleet of 200 vessels, Catherine continued, we were building elsewhere. Quietly, patiently, far from any eyes that might report back to the Council. She pulled up new data on the display. Detailed specifications began scrolling past. showing weapons, systems, and shield configurations that made several of the more technically minded delegates gasp in shock. The United Earth Navy currently has 4,312 warships ready for combat. Another 600 are in the final stages of construction and will be battle-ready within 3 months. "Hi, Arbiter," Zethquan finally found his voice. "These numbers cannot be real," he said, but his tone lacked conviction. The resources needed for such a fleet would be beyond anything a single species could gather. The industrial capacity alone would require exactly what you see on this display. Catherine interrupted. 700 worlds working together for 60 years. Billions of humans who knew that their survival depended on preparing for this day. She stepped forward on the platform. "You see, High Arbiter, humans have a saying, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. We hoped you would leave us alone. We prepared for the day when you would not." The chamber had grown quieter now. The initial panic was fading, replaced by something closer to shock. Many of the delegates simply stared at the display, trying to understand how they had been fooled so completely for so long. Ambassador, Threll of the Morathian hegemony, uncoiled his serpentine body and spoke. His species had been one of the founding members of the Galactic Council, and they were known for their cold intelligence. "Even if these numbers are accurate," he said, "you remain a single species. The Council commands the combined military forces of 47 civilizations. In a prolonged conflict, you would be overwhelmed through simple mathematics." Catherine nodded as if she had expected this argument. "You are absolutely correct, Ambassador. If humanity stood alone, we would eventually lose. Numbers matter in war. Resources matter. Industrial capacity matters." She paused. "Which is why we are not alone." She entered a new command, and the display changed again. This time it showed ships that were clearly not human in design. Sleek vessels with curved hulls that looked almost organic. Massive warships covered in what appeared to be living stone. Craft that seemed to be held together by nothing but energy fields and willpower. "Allow me to introduce you to some old friends," Catherine said. "Or rather, some old enemies of yours that you thought you had dealt with long ago." The first group of ships expanded on the display. They were beautiful in a deadly way, all sharp angles and predatory lines. "The Vethkai," Catherine announced. 400 years ago, your council decided that their species was too aggressive, too independent. You burned their colonies and confined the survivors to a single dying world." She smiled coldly. "They did not die. They hid. They rebuilt. And they remembered." More ships appeared. These were blocky and brutal, designed for one purpose only, breaking through heavy defenses. "The Rathani. You bombarded their homeworld from orbit because they refused to share the secrets of their living stone technology. You killed billions." "You thought you had killed them all?" Catherine shook her head. 40,000 escaped. They fled to the Outer Rim, 2 worlds so far from Council space that nobody bothered to look for them. Today, they number 6 billion. And every single one of them knows exactly who destroyed their world. The display kept expanding. Fleet after fleet appeared, each one representing a species that the Council had conquered, exploited, or tried to exterminate over the centuries. The Genthra, the Malavari, the Pale Wanderers, the Children of Broken Stars. Catherine recited the names like a prayer. 17 species in total. 17 civilizations that your council crushed. 17 peoples who were scattered, broken, and left to die in the forgotten corners of the galaxy. She turned to face the High Arbiter directly. "Humanity found them. We searched the dead zones and the abandoned sectors. We followed old records and ancient rumors. And when we found these broken peoples, we did not conquer them. We did not demand their submission. We helped them." Ambassador Vreen made a sound that his translator could not properly convey. "You have been arming hostile species," he said. "You have been rebuilding enemies of the Council. This is the most serious violation of galactic law in recorded history." "No," Catherine replied. "We have been making friends. There is a difference, though I understand why your people might not recognize it." She pulled up the final display. It showed the combined fleet of the Coalition of Forgotten Worlds, as she called it. Human vessels flew in formation with Vethkai hunters. Rothani siege ships held position alongside craft from a dozen other species. The total number was almost too large to comprehend. 12,000 warships, Catherine said quietly. Plus ground forces, support vessels, and strategic assets that we have been positioning throughout Council space for the past 30 years. She clasped her hands behind her back. You declared war on humanity 45 minutes ago. In response, the Coalition of Forgotten Worlds has authorized me to deliver our answer. The chamber was completely silent now. Not even the gaseous Yulmorians made a sound. We accept your declaration of war, Catherine said, and we are ready. High Arbiter, Zethquan looked at the display then, at the human woman standing alone on the accused platform. His 4 hands were trembling slightly. What have you done? He whispered. Catherine met his gaze without flinching. We have remembered, she said. We have prepared. And now, High Arbiter, we have come to collect a very old debt. The silence in the Great Hall lasted for nearly a minute. 47 alien civilizations stared at the holographic display, trying to understand how the universe had changed so completely in such a short time. The Galactic Council, which had ruled this region of space for over 2,000 years, was facing something it had never encountered before. A real threat. Catherine Holloway watched their faces carefully. She had spent her entire adult life preparing for this moment, studying alien psychology and learning to read expressions that no human had ever seen before. She could see the fear beginning to spread through the chamber. Good. Fear was useful. Fear could be directed. I want to be very clear about something, she said, breaking the silence. Humanity did not seek this war. We did not build this coalition because we enjoy conflict. We built it because you left us no choice. High Arbiter Zethquan had recovered some of his composure. His 4 hands gripped the podium in front of him as he leaned forward. You speak of having no choice, he said, but you have had choices at every step. You could have followed our laws. You could have integrated peacefully into galactic civilization. Instead, you chose deception and preparation for war. We chose survival, Catherine replied. There is a difference. She walked slowly around the platform, addressing the entire chamber. When humanity first achieved faster-than-light travel, we were excited. We thought we would find friends among the stars, partners, perhaps even teachers who could help us grow. She shook her head. Instead, we found you. The display behind her changed, showing records from humanity's first contact with alien life. Images of the Velthari traders who had discovered Earth's first interstellar colony appeared. The Velthari explained the rules very clearly, Catherine continued. Join the Galactic Council, or be conquered. Share all technology, or be declared a threat. Submit to inspection and control, or face military action. She paused. They were very polite about it. They made it sound reasonable, but the meaning was clear. Bow down, or be destroyed. Ambassador Threll coiled higher in his seat. The Council's requirements exist for good reason, he said. Uncontrolled expansion leads to conflict. Unrestricted weapons development leads to arms races. Without central authority, the galaxy would dissolve into constant warfare. Perhaps, Catherine acknowledged. But who decided that the Council should be that central authority? Who voted for the 47 species who ruled this region of space? She spread her hands. The answer is no one. The Council exists because its members were strong enough to crush anyone who disagreed with them. You call it peace. We call it empire. The word hung in the air like a curse. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. We studied your history very carefully, Catherine said. We learned what happened to species that tried to resist the Council openly. The Vethkai lost 90% of their population. The Rothani were nearly exterminated. The Pale Wanderers were hunted across 3 galactic arms until they fled into the void between galaxies. She shook her head. Open resistance was suicide, so we chose a different path. She pulled up new images on the display. These showed human diplomatic missions meeting with alien survivors in the hidden corners of space. We searched for the broken peoples, the survivors of Council aggression who had been scattered and forgotten. We found them in places your sensors never bothered to scan. Dead worlds. dying systems. The empty spaces between stars where nothing of value existed. The display showed a human ship making contact with a Vethkai refugee colony. The aliens were thin and weak, their once proud civilization reduced to a few thousand individuals living on a barren moon. "We gave them food," Catherine said softly. "We gave them medical supplies. We gave them hope." She paused. "And then we gave them weapons." Ambassador Vreen clicked his mandibles in what his translator rendered as disgust. "You armed species that the Council had pacified for good reason." The Vethkai were aggressive predators who threatened their neighbors. The Rathani developed biological weapons that could destroy entire ecosystems. These peoples were contained to protect galactic civilization. They were contained to protect Council power, Catherine corrected. The Vethkai were aggressive because they refused to submit. The Rathani developed weapons because why we're fighting for survival against overwhelming force. She turned to face the insectoid ambassador directly. "Your own species, ambassador, was pacified by the Council 800 years ago. The Kethra used to be independent. Used to have their own territory, their own government, their own fleet. Now you follow Council orders like loyal servants." Rian's compound eyes flickered, but he said nothing. "We offered the broken people something they had not received in centuries," Catherine continued. "Respect, partnership, a chance to rebuild without supervision or control. And in return, they offered us their friendship and their strength." The display now showed images of human engineers working alongside Rathani scientists. Vethkai warriors training with human special forces. Children of different species playing together in shared habitats. "The Coalition of Forgotten Worlds is not a military alliance," Catherine said. "It is a family. 17 species who were told they were worthless, who were beaten down and left to die, who found each other in the darkness and decided to build something better." High Arbiter Zethquan had been quiet for several minutes. Now he spoke again, his voice thoughtful rather than angry. "You have built an impressive force," he admitted. "But military strength alone does not win wars. Supply lines must be maintained. Populations must support the conflict. Strategic objectives must be achievable." He spread his 4 hands. "What do you actually hope to accomplish? Even if you defeat our forces in initial engagements, the Council can draw on the resources of 47 civilizations. We can replace our losses, can you?" Catherine nodded slowly. "That is the right question, High Arbiter. Thank you for asking it." She clasped her hands behind her back. "The Coalition does not want to conquer the galaxy. We do not want to replace the Council with another empire. We want something far more radical." She entered a new command, and the display changed once more. Instead of military formations, it showed political maps, economic data, population statistics. "We want freedom," Catherine said simply. "Real freedom. The right of every species to determine their own future without interference. The right to develop technology without inspection. The right to expand without permission. The right to say no to powerful neighbors without being destroyed for it." Ambassador Threll made a hissing sound. "That is chaos. Without the Council's laws, species would fight each other constantly. The strong would prey on the weak. There would be no order. There would be choice," Catherine replied. "Which is something your Council has never offered." She turned to address all the delegates. "Look around this chamber. How many of you are truly here because you want to be? How many joined the Council because the alternative was destruction?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "Humanity is not asking you to destroy the Council," Catherine said. "We are asking you to change it. Replace force with cooperation. Replace mandatory integration with voluntary partnership. Replace the law of the strong with the rights of all peoples." Walked back to the center of the platform and looked up at the High Arbiter. "You can accept these changes peacefully and negotiate a new galactic order. Or you can refuse, and we will fight until you have no choice but to accept." She smiled, but her eyes were hard. "Either way, High Arbiter, the old order ends today. The only question is, how many people have to die before you admit it?" The chaos that followed Catherine's speech lasted for nearly 2 hours. Delegates screamed at each other across the chamber. Several attempted to leave, only to discover that the Great Hall's doors had been sealed according to standard protocols for active diplomatic sessions. The irony was not lost on Catherine, who watched from her platform with quiet patience. She had expected this reaction. 60 years of planning had taught humanity a great deal about how the Council's member species would respond to crisis. The aggressive ones would demand immediate military action. The cautious ones would argue for negotiation. And the smaller, weaker species would watch carefully, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. Eventually, High Arbiter Zethquan managed to restore order. He looked older than he had at the start of the session, his pale blue skin seeming somehow faded. His 4 hands moved slowly as he addressed the chamber. "We will have silence," he commanded. "We will discuss this matter as civilized beings, not as animals fighting over scraps." The chamber gradually quieted. Delegates returned to their seats. Though the tension in the air remained thick enough to cut, "Ambassador Holloway," Zethquan said, using her formal title for the first time, "you have made extraordinary claims and extraordinary threats. Before we proceed, I must ask you a direct question. Is there any path forward that does not involve bloodshed?" Catherine considered her response carefully. This was the moment she had been trained for, the question that would determine whether the next years would be filled with war or with hope. "Yes," she said simply. "There is such a path. But it requires something the Council has never done before." "And what is that?" "Admitting that you were wrong," a murmur ran through the chamber. Several delegates looked outraged at the suggestion. Others leaned forward with interest. "When I was a young woman," Catherine continued, "I studied human history extensively. Our species has made terrible mistakes over the centuries. We have conquered and enslaved. We have destroyed and exploited. We have done all the things that the Council has done, just on a smaller scale." She paused. "But we also learned from those mistakes. We changed. We grew." She pulled up images on the display showing moments from human history. Wars and atrocities, yes, but also peace treaties and reconciliations. Former enemies becoming allies. Oppressed peoples gaining freedom and equality. "Humanity's greatest strength is not our technology or our numbers," Catherine said. "It is our ability to change, to look at ourselves honestly and admit when we have been wrong, to do better." She gestured toward the assembled delegates. "The Council has never done this. When you make mistakes, you bury them. When you commit atrocities, you classify the records. When broken peoples cry out for justice, you silence them." High Arbiter Zethquan's expression was difficult to read. "You speak of justice," he said, "but the coalition you have built is founded on revenge. The species you have assembled hate us. They want to destroy everything we have created." "Some of them do," Catherine admitted. "After what was done to them, who could blame them?" The Rathani watched their world burn. The Vethkai were hunted like animals. The Pale Wanderers lost everything they had ever built. She shook her head. "Yes, there is hatred in the coalition. There is rage. There is a hunger for revenge that has been building for centuries." She stepped forward, her voice softening. "But that is not why they joined us. They joined us because humanity offered them something more valuable than revenge. We offered them a future, a chance to build something new instead of just destroying something old." Ambassador Vrian clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "You ask us to believe that species with every reason to hate us will simply forget their grievances if we agree to your demands. This seems unlikely." "I am not asking you to believe anything," Catherine replied. "I am asking you to give them a reason to choose peace over war."
Ow.
She turned to address the entire chamber. "The Coalition did not come here to exterminate the Council species. We came here to end the system that created so much suffering. If that system changes, if real justice becomes possible, then the hunger for revenge loses its power." The display changed again, showing images of coalition worlds. Human and Rathani families living together in shared communities. Vethkai children learning alongside human students. Species that had been enemies for centuries working side by side on construction projects. "This is what we have built," Catherine said quietly. A coalition where species cooperate because they choose to, not because they are forced to. Where differences are respected instead of crushed. Where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. She met the High Arbiter's eyes. This is the future we want to share with the galaxy. The question is whether the Council will accept it willingly or resist until there is nothing left to save. Zethquan was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with the weight of centuries. What you propose would require dismantling everything we have built. The laws that hold the galaxy together, the structures that maintain order, the very foundation of interstellar civilization. Not dismantling, Catherine said. Transforming. There is a difference. She pulled up a new display showing a detailed proposal. We have spent decades thinking about this. We know that change cannot happen overnight. We know that trust must be rebuilt slowly. The coalition is prepared to negotiate in good faith, to compromise on details, to give the Council time to adapt. She scrolled through the proposal, highlighting key points. No forced integration for any species. Voluntary membership in any alliance or organization. Free trade across all borders. Independent development of technology without mandatory inspection. Guaranteed protection for pre-spacefaring species without forced intervention. She looked up. These are our basic demands. Everything else is negotiable. Ambassador Threll studied the display with cold, calculating eyes. And if we refuse, if we choose to fight rather than surrender our authority, Catherine's expression hardened. Then we will fight, and we will win. Not because we are stronger, but because we have nothing to lose. Every species in the coalition has already lost everything once. They know what destruction looks like. They are not afraid of it anymore. She paused. Can you say the same about your peoples? When the war comes to their worlds, when they start losing sons and daughters to a conflict that did not have to happen, will they still support you? The question hung in the air like a blade. We know how the Council works, Catherine continued. We know that your unity is held together by fear and mutual suspicion. We know which species secretly resent their membership. We know which leaders are looking for an opportunity to break free. She smiled slightly. We are not just offering peace to the Council as a whole. We are offering freedom to any species brave enough to take it. Several delegates exchanged nervous glances. Catherine had just revealed that the coalition understood the fault lines within the Council. The hidden tensions that everyone pretended did not exist. You have 30 standard rotations to consider our proposal, Catherine said. During that time, there will be no military action from the coalition. We will wait for your answer. She paused. But I want to be very clear about one thing. This offer will not be extended again. If you choose war, we will prosecute it until one side or the other has nothing left to fight with. She turned and began walking toward the exit of the platform. Then she stopped and looked back over her shoulder. 60 years ago, you gave humanity a choice. Submit or be destroyed. Today, we return that choice to you. Her voice was calm but final. Choose wisely, High Arbiter. The future of every species in this galaxy depends on what you decide next. She walked off the platform, leaving the Galactic Council to contemplate a universe that had suddenly become very different from the one they had known. The negotiations lasted for 11 months. It was not a smooth process. There were moments when everything nearly collapsed, when old hatreds flared up and threatened to destroy any chance of peace. The Rathani delegation walked out 3 times during the first month alone, demanding justice for their destroyed homeworld. The Vethkai were barely restrained from launching raids on Council supply lines. And within the Council itself, hardline factions attempted to separate coups to restore the old order. Catherine Holloway handled each crisis with the same patient determination she had shown in the Great Hall. She spent hours in private meetings, talking with representatives from both sides, finding common ground where none seemed to exist. She reminded the coalition species of why they had joined together in the first place. She showed the Council delegates that their fears of total destruction were not justified. Slowly, impossibly, progress was made. The first breakthrough came when the Kethra formally requested permission to leave the council and join the coalition. Ambassador Vreen had been deeply affected by Catherine's words about his species' lost independence. After weeks of secret communications with his homeworld, he announced that the Kethra people wanted their freedom back. The council's initial response was fury. Several delegations demanded immediate military action against the Kethra for their betrayal. But Catherine was ready for this. She had positioned coalition forces to protect the Kethra systems, making it clear that any attack would trigger the full-scale war everyone was trying to avoid. 9 more council species followed the Kethra within the next 2 months. The monolithic alliance that had ruled the galaxy for 2,000 years began to crack from within. High Arbiter Zethquan watched these developments with growing despair. Everything he had worked for his entire long life was falling apart. The order he had sworn to protect was dissolving like morning mist. For a time, he considered ending the negotiations and launching a desperate attack against the coalition while the council still had numerical superiority. But then he did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He asked to meet with Catherine privately. They sat together in a small conference room far from the Great Hall. Without the crowds and the displays and the political theater, they were just 2 individuals trying to understand each other. "Oh," Zethquan asked quietly. "Why did your species do this? You could have joined the council. You could have risen through our ranks, gained influence, eventually shaped policy from within. Instead, you spent 60 years building a force to destroy us." Catherine thought about the question for a long time before answering. "When I was a child," she said, "my grandfather told me stories about human history. He talked about empires that seemed invincible but crumbled when their subjects stopped believing in them. He talked about systems of control that lasted for centuries, until someone finally said enough." She looked at the High Arbiter with something close to sympathy. "The Council is not evil, Zethquan, but it is built on a foundation of fear and force. Systems like that always fall eventually. We simply decided to be the ones who pushed." The High Arbiter was silent for a moment. Then he asked another question. "And what happens now? When the old order is gone, and your coalition rules in its place, what will prevent you from becoming exactly what we were?" Catherine smiled sadly. "Nothing," she admitted. "There is no guarantee. Power corrupts. Coalitions fracture. Good intentions are forgotten over time." She leaned forward. "But we have one advantage that the Council never had. We remember what it feels like to be powerless. Every species in the coalition knows what it means to be crushed by someone stronger. That memory will keep us honest, at least for a while." The negotiations resumed with renewed energy after that conversation. Zethquan became an unexpected ally, using his influence to convince the remaining council hardliners that resistance was futile. Together, they worked to craft an agreement that could satisfy both sides. The final treaty was signed on a newly constructed space station in unclaimed territory. They called it the Compact of Unconcordant Worlds, and it represented the most ambitious political document in galactic history. The core principles were simple: no forced integration, no punishment for species that chose independence, no economic exploitation of weaker civilizations, an equal representation for every spacefaring people regardless of military or economic power. Details were complex, and compromises were made on all sides. But the basic framework promised something that had never existed before: a galaxy based on cooperation rather than domination. Catherine Holloway stood at the signing ceremony, watching as delegation after delegation added their marks to the document. Human representatives signed alongside Rathani generals. Vethkai commanders stood shoulder to shoulder with former council admirals. Even species that had been at war with each other for centuries came together to create something new. High Arbiter Zethquan was among the last to sign. He approached Catherine before taking his place at the ceremonial table. "I have lived for over 400 of your Earth years," he said. "I have watched empires rise and fall. I have seen species destroy themselves and others reach for greatness." He paused, his 6 eyes studying her face. "I have never seen anything like what your people have accomplished. You changed the galaxy without firing a single shot. We were prepared to fire many shots, Catherine replied honestly. We would have, if we had no other choice. I am grateful that we found another way. The High Arbiter nodded slowly. So am I, he hesitated, then extended one of his 4 hands in the human gesture of respect. I hope that the future you are building will be better than the past we are leaving behind. Catherine shook his hand firmly. So do I, she said. But hope is not enough. We will have to work for it. Every species, every generation. The compact is just words on a document. Making it real will take the rest of our lives and beyond. Zethquan smiled, a strange expression on his alien features. Then we should begin. After the ceremony, Catherine walked alone to an observation deck that looked out over the gathered fleet. Ships from dozens of civilizations held formation in careful arrangement. Human vessels flew alongside Vethkai hunters. Rathani dreadnoughts maintained a station beside former council peacekeepers. It was a sight that no one would have believed possible 60 years ago. Her communicator buzzed. A message from Earth, from the young diplomats who would carry her work forward into the future. They wanted to know what came next. Catherine thought about her grandfather who had first sparked her interest in the stars, about her parents who had supported her dream of becoming a diplomat, about the countless humans who had worked in secret for decades, knowing they might never see the results of their labor. She thought about the 17 broken species who had trusted humanity when they had every reason to trust no one. About the billions of beings across the galaxy who were waking up this morning in a universe that offered them possibilities they had never known before. She typed her response. What comes next is the hard part. Building something real. Learning to trust each other. Making the words of the compact into the reality of everyday life. It will take generations. There will be setbacks and failures, but for the first time in galactic history, every species has a chance to shape their own destiny. She paused, then added, The war is over. The work begins. Catherine Holloway looked out at the stars.